Mm. Um, mm, mm. So, hi everyone who has joined now. We're still waiting for everybody to join. So, we will take some minutes before we start. So, meanwhile, if you want to unmute yourself and say hi or turn on your camera, that's up to you. It would be lovely to hear you and to hear how your day has been so far. Mm. Hi, Gayatri. I can see you. I cannot hear you, unfortunately. I still cannot hear you. I can see you. I see that you're speaking, but I cannot hear you. Sorry. I cannot hear you still. Maybe if you want, I mean, you can log out and log in again and try. Sometimes it's just connection problems. Hi, everyone else. We're just waiting a little bit for everybody to get in. Hi, Sierra. And then we will start.
Hi, thank you.
Hello. Okay. Anybody today has had a sunny day? It's not sunny in Brussels today.
Italy is sunny and quite hot, 23
Oh,
degrees outside. I'm in Bergamo right now.
oh, lucky you, Sarah.
Sorry, I
Nice.
cannot open my
No, it's
webcam
okay.
because I'm driving. Sorry, I
It's
will
okay.
follow
Be
you.
safe. Be
Thank
safe.
you.
Mm-mm. We will wait 3 more minutes exactly, and then we can start. Please feel free to say hi if you want to.
Can
I
you
see
hear me now?
people. Yeah, I can
Nadia?
hear you.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. I just refreshed my screen and then
Oh,
I
that's
got it.
great. How are you
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah, good. Good. So far, so good. It has been
Nice.
really pleasant weather for us today after a heavy week of sunny weather up to 26 last week.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
today has
That's
been a little bit, cooling down. Sun is taking a break.
Oh, you don't like the sun.
No, it's cooling a bit. Last week was
Okay.
very severe. It went up to 26.
I
So the
am
sun
south
is,
I am Southern Mediterranean, so I just
yeah,
love the sun. And
yes,
I
yes, of
don't like
course,
it when
yes.
it's cold.
I think the sun is taking a break
Oh,
after
yeah,
too hot, 2
definitely.
weeks of very sunny days. For us in Netherlands,
Right.
it's very unusual. So yeah.
It's the same here in Brussels. It's very, very unusual. We never have the
Mm.
sun at all.
Mm.
So yeah, sun been friendly to us for a moment now. It's over. All right, thank
I
you so
think,
much. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I'll mute it and yeah.
sorry.
I'm going to mute now.
No, I mean, if you want to say something, please go ahead.
I'm looking forward to this session. Let's see.
Yeah,
Maybe
thank
we'll
you.
catch up after that. Yeah. Mm.
I think we're gonna have a good one.
Yes.
Um, so I think 1 minute and we will start. We always give 5 minutes of grace for everybody to join, and then we
Mm.
go ahead. Hi, everyone who just joined. Nice. I see people coming in. Okay, so I think it's time. So, good evening, everyone. I hope you are all doing great. So, today's session is with Fabio, and the topic is regulatory compliance and leadership and cybersecurity. I will leave the floor to Fabio. I will be here, like usual, to moderate, to help, to answer questions in the chat. Please, if you have any questions, always write them down. At the end, we will have, like usual, about 15 to 20 minutes of Q&As. And then Fabio can go through all the questions that you had, and we can answer them, either the ones by writing, or of course you can unmute yourself then and ask your question, and Fabio will be there to answer directly. So I'm going to leave the floor to you, Fabio,
So thank you very
and
much.
I'm going to mute myself. Thank you.
So thank you very much for your time, of course, to join. The audience is very, very interesting for me. So just going through very quick presentation of myself. So I'm not going through all the information. I'm just like a senior cyber information security manager at Infineon. The only thing that I suppose is interesting just in my say past experiences that I'm like the master of inconsistency because I had like a degree in engineering, then I had the PhD in political sciences, then I moved to consulting, and then I jumped into cybersecurity. So anyone who wants really to change their career during their year, I would say I could be like a good example that can help also in this. So going through our agenda today. So I'm starting discussing about the role of regulation and then the regulatory compliance, the challenges that we are having right now, and how to approach with a leadership to the regulatory changes, and at the end, like a very jumping cybersecurity governance. So starting from the, I would say, far away and going into why cybersecurity and especially compliance is becoming more and more important. So first of all, we are having around the world, especially three different kind of approaches to cybersecurity and compliance. And these three different approaches are expected to be the time coming much more broadened. Since we are talking about Europe, cybersecurity and compliance to cybersecurity is concentrated especially on applying to fundamental rights, while compliance in China is much more concentrated on managing infrastructure and surveillance. And on the opposite side, we have the United States approach, which is boosting entrepreneurship and innovation. So as you can imagine, we are having just right now three different important approaches, and we are concentrating now on the European, but just letting Manuel uh, uh, give you the opportunity to answer a quick question that really help us understanding which are the free approaches.
You can see the questions now, everyone. So please go ahead and answer. And if you cannot see the question, please let me know. But I think it appears to everyone's screen. And I see that some of you are already answering. So there are no wrong answers.
Sorry, I cannot answer because I'm driving. I hope this is not
no
a problem.
I can read
okay,
for
thank
you. So the question says, which of the following is not a fundamental right in the European Union? 1, protection of personal data. 2, health care. 3, freedom to conduct a business. 4, environmental protection. And 4, defense. So the question again, which is not a fundamental right in the European Union? There are no wrong answers, everyone. We're just trying to figure out. The last defense? Okay. So I'll vote for you. I voted instead of you.
Thank you.
Sure. I see that we're still having answers.
Hello. I don't know if I vote, but there is something pop up like this bot is disabled. Contact your IT admin for more information.
Yeah, we have just finished the poll, and I think you just voted before I clicked done. So sorry about that, but you can write down your answer if you want. You
No,
already
it was
did.
before, in fact. I don't know. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, such things happen. So we have 63% freedom to conduct business. That is not fundamental right in the European Union. 30% said environmental protection, and 25% said defense. So these are the results, and I'm going to mute myself and leave the floor to Fabio.
So taking these results, the thing is there is actually a wrong, a correct answer, which is defense. So, and if you just coming back to this slide, if we go through other countries outside the European Union, especially the United States, you can see that, for instance, in the United States, the self-defense is a right for the Americans, but it's not a fundamental right. Healthcare is not a fundamental right. The environmental protection, and especially coming to our, we'll say, most important element, protection of personal data is not a fundamental right. So going through the next point, why regulation is becoming more stringent, because we are in the middle of changing period where privacy is becoming an element of their importance. Defense, you can see newspapers everywhere. We are also having like increased elements of defense. Threats is becoming much more important. Impacts on everyday life because of cybersecurity is becoming very, very important. Just let me think about 3 years ago when an hospital was attacked in Germany and the person died because of lack of power in the surgery room. And globalization is taking, I would say, the opposite way. So like deglobalization is becoming much more important. So regulations, at least in European Union, in terms of defending the fundamental rights, are ruling many of these aspects in order to let us continue our lives in, I would say, in a safer and secure manner. So which are the challenges today? Challenges we can define in terms of respecting or going through some European regulatory framework, which we can divide into 3 elements in terms of importance, which are national, or in this case, international regulations, which are fundamental for us. And those ones that are much more impacting at the moment could be GDPR, that maybe all of you know, the NIS directive, the Data Act, and so on and so forth. Then there is a second level of the regulatory framework, which are international standards. International standards are standards that are considered like fundamental in many countries around the world, and especially in Europe, but they're not compulsory. So meaning there is no obligations for you to be compliant with them, like ISO 270 series, NIST 800, which is American, and so on and so forth. And last but not least, there are also industry standards. These are for sure not mandatory, but the thing is, if you want to deal within some specific industry, you are requested to be compliant with them. I just like quoting some of them. Each IBPA regards the healthcare system. PCI-DSS is regards finance, especially payments transactions. TISAX regards automotive, GSMA is telecommunication, and so on and so forth. The thing is, the most important thing is for any entity is to understand exactly which are the regulations that directly affect you. And of course, when you're going to make an analysis about which are most important to comply, you should go through this list. So on top, the national and international regulations until the industry standards. What are at the moment the most important regulations in Europe that are emerging and becoming much more important? So we have 4 areas of industries that are going to be affected. The first one is DORA, which stands for Digital Operation Resilience Act. This impacts the managing of the risks, so increases the comprehensive IT risk management. It requires much more resilience by the fintech actors, much more controls to the third parties, and the sharing of any kind of vulnerabilities and threats between the finance sector. Then we're going to the digital entities. So anyone who has any digital component, and this is the Network and Information Security Directive, actually is not the first version. The first version dates back to 2018, but the new version is more or less affecting any single company who has more than 50 employees in Europe. And so it increases the scope, gives minimum cybersecurity standards, needs to have very strict control on your supply chain, supervision and reporting of incidents, and nevertheless also a certainty that your board of directors has a proper cybersecurity awareness. Then there is the 2 different acts that combines, which are the Data Act and AI Act. Maybe you know all of them, especially the AI Act that poses like minimum cybersecurity measures and elements of AI that cannot be introduced in the European Union. On the opposite side, but combined, we have the Data Act that ensures much more security data access, data handling, and data protection awareness, as well as transparency on data management. And last but not least, the Cyber Resilience Act, which is like, I would say, a residual elements, meaning anyone who are producing digital elements that are not yet under any European scope goes into this specific act that requires cybersecurity by design, even for products, and not only products that are sold, but even just, for instance, for prototypes or open source elements. That requires any of them like could go through conformity assessments and also vulnerability handling in case of any one of them for all the chains, so from suppliers to customers. So how to approach to be on top, I will say, or at least be on the, I will say, list of the best in class for regulatory management. So there are two different approaches that can be applied. The first one is the most known one, is a managerial approach, which is called PDCA, which stands for Plan, Do, Check, and Act. What does it mean? It means basically that any kind of nuance that is coming should be treated like a new plan, so a new planning activity, which includes resource allocation for what you are needed, and cybersecurity settings as objectives. So what you need to do, of course, after this is to implement everything that you have planned, of course, in efficient and effective way. And how you do it, of course, is like through implementation itself of the cybersecurity controls, but of course through awareness and training and management of potential incidents. Then you check what you did basically, so through your monitoring system and through audits and so on and so forth. And here is, we'll say, the topic element where you have to do the typical three elements of controls, which are KRIs, KPIs, and audits. And at the end, if from these elements, so from KPI, KRI, or audits, there is any slight differences from what you're planning, then it's the moment to act in terms of reviewing and enhancing your policies, your controls, and improve, of course, what is not yet covered by your processes and training, and of course your last communication. And this is a cycle because, of course, at the end of this cycle there are new potentially regulation coming, so there is a new form of PDCA activities. That's the most known one, but there is another approach that personally I prefer, but of course anyone has its own preference, which is the public policy approach. The public policy approach basically divides into two different actions, and actions that can be managed internally as a company or as a public entity, and those ones that you have partial or less control. So on top you will see those that you have partially or no control, and the other and down the line you have those ones that you have a direct control. So the first one is defining the issue. So the issue is what is needed to be tackled, and generally this issue does not come from you directly, but is generally from an external source. In case of a legislative framework, for instance, you don't have direct control. If you have an issue coming from your customers, you don't have directly control. If you have issues coming from suppliers, you don't have directly control. What you have to do is to take care and to check continuously if there is any change in these issues. So what you can start doing is posing objectives. So for an issue that needs to be treated, you can put, or you can start putting objectives like corporate goals, for instance, or defining specific targets in order to tackle these issues and set priorities, for instance, like cost benefit analysis and so on and so forth, in order to decline what are going to be your own objectives. What you can do for sure from the objectives that you got is to start managing your input. So the resources that you need to do in order to tackle these issues. And so it's like making your own internal assessments to verify if you are fulfilling or not the objectives, having your cybersecurity experts working with you, and of course allocating your budget, personnel, and technology to do this. Your output are going to be in terms of compliance, your policy and standards, and of course from this you get your controls that needs to be applied, and of course the cybersecurity awareness and training in order to manage the implementation of these outputs. And next, what comes, sorry, before going next, here is the moment where you have your first control about your KPIs. So understanding if your outputs really respect the initial idea of your input. And then you have your outcomes. So the thing is, you have the consequences of your actions that becomes adoption of the cybersecurity best practices is like minimizing like the potential impacts that are generated by cybersecurity events and taking care about your security posture. So understanding if you manage to improve. And here comes the audits. So the audits verifies that if you're really fulfilled what is expected to do. And then, but not least, there is the last mile, which are the results. The results are not generally the same thing as the outcomes. Why? Because there is the, as we said, the implementation phase, and the implementation phase has generally a connection with the environment where you're implementing this, which can be like a human environment. So specific culture where you're implementing this, generally multinational companies could have problems in terms of the same implementation in multi-cultures, or the situation has changed from the beginning. So you started with the process in the input, I don't know, 1 year before, and now the story already has changed. So the only thing that you can do is continuously verifying the evolving threats, reducing the impact that can be generated during the implementation phases, and trying to get much more trust, reputation, and confidence with your I would say, stakeholders as a whole. And then the cycles closes basically because from the results you can define or you can get new objective and so on and so forth. So I invite Manel to open the second question in order to better understand this concept.
Everyone can see it now, so please vote on your answer and let me know if you cannot see it. I see that some of you already had started answering. Again, there is no right and wrong. You just go with your answer now, and then Fabio will explain what is the correct one, but nobody's going to say, why did you choose the wrong one? So just go ahead with the thought that you have in mind, and then Fabio will explain. I see now that some of you are still have to answer. Answers are coming up. So please vote if you have not voted yet. Okay. Esina, does not does the poll works for you or it does not work? Just so I could know if there is some technical problem. All right, so has everybody voted? Okay, so if it doesn't work for you, you can go ahead and write in the chat box. And I'm going to write it for you. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going to finish with the poll. So here are the results. So for the results, we have 79% who voted on effectiveness, and then we have 15% voted on consistency, and only 5% voted on integrity. And we have the votes, effectiveness mostly is what the majority went for.
Okay, so can I ask those women who selected consistency to raise their hand?
If you chose consistency, just raise your hand. There are no punishments. We just want some interaction.
Okay, so thank you very much for raising the hands. So the answer is correct. So you did a very good job, I would say. And so applause to all of you. So, and why I'll try to explain. So the thing is, the far majority chose effectiveness. So effectiveness is a very good way of checking your activities, but the thing is, effectiveness is something that you have your own control. So the thing is, you can see if your activity has an effective has an effective consequences, since you have an input and you have an outcome. So the outcome is what you are expecting to have in the small run. But consistency is what really connects the results to the objectives, because as I said in the beginning, results is a consequence that you do not totally control. So the thing is, the best thing is to see if actually your results at least are consistent with the initial objective. And the reason why you need to check the consistency is because, as I said, the final results are really conditioned by the human, technological, and I will say also political environment where you are trying to apply your outcomes. And so if you're at least consistent, so your results can somewhat chase the initial issues, then you have, I will say, did your job well. But at the same time, the bad news would be many things were not under your control. So you managed to have very good outcomes. So you are effective, very effective on your input, but something happened, and so it were not under your control. Last but not least, in the list there was also integrity, which doesn't have anything to do with this element. Integrity is part of a confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which is a different concept of cybersecurity, and efficiency regards just the relationship between input and output. Okay, so we can go to the next point, which is cybersecurity governance. So to be fairly honest, this is not, I would say, totally an idea coming from my own brain. I took it from a GRC solution, but just to give you the idea of what are the most important elements that we need to consider in our compliance phase. So compliance is part of the problems that we need to solve. The solutions are generally meant connected with three elements, which are the internal controls that we can put in place in our organizations in order to chase any cybersecurity requirement. We need also to have security controls. So internal controls generally refers to the organization. Then we have also security controls that we can apply in order to be as much as close to full, I will say, comprehensive security in terms of IT elements, so technology wide. And then we can also have exceptions that we might apply in order to not to block our business or block our activities. In terms of problems, of course, we have also to solve risks and data privacy concerns, but in this case, I will say it's not part of this specific webinar. The only thing that we need to take always in consideration is that when we not want to implement internal controls, so organizational controls, security controls, or any kind of exception, anything of this needs to be addressed by specific projects. So it's not something that can be invented just from the blue. It's not something that you are intended to implement like just an urgency, because otherwise urgency explodes in the long run. What is very important is to have in mind a project and so plans, and any single internal control, security control, or exceptions that they are going to implement has a cost, and you need to focus specifically on which kind of cost you can bear and cost that you cannot bear, because otherwise you're going to, I don't know, imagine that you can implement thousands of controls, but at the end of the day, maybe you don't have the capacity to really apply them. So it's very, very important to be able to understand internal controls, security controls, and exceptions that can be actually actioned, and those ones that you cannot action. And coming back just 1 second for academic idea of risk management, sometimes you are forced to avoid the risk in order to stay compliant, but of course not to run a specific business, because otherwise it would cost you much more than what you can really expect to manage. Last but not least, slide is here. Approach to cybersecurity is changing years over years. We started from, I would say, the 90s, when we had the idea that security was just a technical problem. So typical, I would say, TV series where you see people like hacking everything and everywhere, and the only solution was to block the hackers, and the solution was there. And so the solution was just a list of operational instructions that could work. Today, cybersecurity is totally different. It still has to do with IT technical problems, but it's much more broadened view, which has to involve, first of all, human actors much more than just technological actors. That has to do with multiple departments within the same organizations. That goes from, of course, IT, but legal, procurement, HR, real estate, facility management, training, and sometimes also has to do with psychological safety, because sometimes attackers can manage to access something just because they managed to reach the, I would say, the weakest chain in your entity, and so people must be put as the first elements to take in consideration. And of course, governance drives and controls what exactly today implementation of security measures, and security measures are, as I said, people and technology at the same time. So what I can say is thank you for your attention. I just left this say quotation from the Latin, so who manages to translate is very welcome. And in general talking, I need to thank you, especially the women in my team that really supported me in my company to manage to realize this this presentation. So now the chair is yours. Happy to answer your questions, and thank you very much for your for
Thank
everything.
you so much, Fabio. So it's time for Q&As. So please, if you have any questions, just raise your hand and you can go ahead directly, ask your question with Fabio and he would answer. So we'll go with the first hand. It was, oh no, the hand disappeared. Okay, so if you have a question, just raise your hand, unmute yourself, and go ahead. You can just write down also your answer if you're not comfortable asking directly. You can do that too. And Fabio is here to discuss with you and answer your questions. So, anyone wants to go first? I don't see any raised. Okay, we have Anna. Anna, could you please unmute yourself and go ahead?
Hello. Hi. Can you hear me well?
Hi, yeah, perfectly.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for an interesting presentation. This is a really nice opportunity that I randomly found, so thank you so much. I'm a newly graduated student and just getting the hand of cybersecurity. And I believe my Wi-Fi was a bit off maybe when you were talking about public policy approaches to security governance. So I'm not sure, but could you bring some real life examples? So because I didn't hear that part very well. So could I ask you to bring some examples on, for instance, some of the governances who have been the best at incoming international regulation threats?
Yes. So just going directly to the last slides of these ones, just to give you a very quick overview. So imagine that you have an entity. I would say let's take the regulation that maybe has much more implementation expectations around Europe. So which is the NIS2 regulation. So imagine that you are an entity who is expected to implement this regulation. What is your perspective? So the issue for sure is not your perspective or any kind of potential activity, because you're expected not to run down the legislation. What you need to do is to stay always informed about any potential evaluation of the regulation. The thing that you can do partially is objectives, meaning the objectives are already present in the regulation on the implementation acts, but what you can do is to revise the objectives of your company or your public entity in order to stay compliant with NIS2. After defining which are the new objectives for your entity, you need to put down your inputs. Like, for instance, I need to change partially my organization. I need to, for instance, change or adapt part of my IT security controls. Do I need, for instance, to partially hire an expert on this, and so on and so forth. And of course, we are always talking about money talks. So also, of course, declining your new resources that you need to implement. Then what is your output, direct output? Like, for instance, revision of your internal policies and procedure could be like revision of your controls, revision or implementation of a new awareness and training, and so on and so forth. What is going to be your outcome? Your outcome is how my company or my public body managed to comply with this new regulation. Okay. But actually your final results is not your outcome. Your final results is how this new compliance say environment has impacted into my entity. So did we manage to fully comply? Yes or no? Hopefully then the final results will be yes. Okay. How we managed to get to this final result is, of course, all the activity input from input to output to outcome. But maybe, for instance, we are an international company, and we have, I don't know, headquarter in Austria, but we also have a couple of sites in Poland and I don't know, in Luxembourg. So the final results are different in terms of what we managed to do in Austria, in Luxembourg, or in Poland, because we have different cultures. And so we have different way of implementing the output and the outcomes. And so we'll say the cycle closes, because if there is an update of a NIS2, maybe, I don't know, in 5 years from now, we have NIS3. So which are the new objectives that we need to generate in order to be compliant with the NIS number 3? I don't know if I managed to answer this question.
Yes, thank you so much. And can I ask a quick follow-up question?
Yes.
Do you think that this also very well complies with post-Soviet states? Like, I know the Baltics are very big on cyber attacks, so I'm interested if you've looked into it and the same approach could be delved into there.
So basically, this approach can be applied almost everywhere. What changes are the elements that I put like on top of the line. So what changes are the issues, not the same countries as the same issues. Okay. The objectives that you have, because maybe you have national objectives or even hyper local objectives that are not the same as the general issue, and also how your company is implementing them, or company or public body is translating them into internal objectives changes. And the final results, as I said, might change. So imagine that you are part of an international entity that has the same input, the same output, the same outcomes. So exactly the same policies, the same procedures, the same security controls written on paper. Okay, maybe nobody is using like pen and paper, but of course, like in a virtual way. And then you have different results, because when you're talking with your colleague, I don't know, in the Baltics, and you have your colleagues in, I don't know, in Portugal, you say, we both implemented this. Okay, so, but why are you behaving in a different way? And this is the part of the results.
All right. Anna, do you have any comments?
No, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you, Fabio, for the answers. I have two more questions for you, Fabio, from different participants, and then one from myself. So the first one, Sira said, what challenges do you face when aligning compliance requirements across multiple jurisdictions? What challenges do you face when aligning compliance requirements across multiple jurisdictions?
So, in my humble answer, I would say, since I'm generally talking very fond of public law in general, the thing is, before getting into the idea of complying with a specific legislation, I would say first think about the geopolitical context. In my opinion, is much more important, because jurisdictions are law, of course, written into stones or into rocks or into paper, as you prefer, that of course you need to align. But things that are written, for instance, in a specific country with the same wording, maybe would mean different reactions for the public body that are going, for instance, to audit you. So first of all, you need to concentrate very well on understanding the environment that you are going to go through. First of all, stated that going through different jurisdictions means sometimes that you can have like a general policy in your company that fits for all. And my humble suggestion is, let's take the umbrella policy or the high level policy as you prefer, as most generic as possible, and then having like specific rules implemented in specific countries that do not align, I will say, generally talking, with your general expectation as a company. That would be an alternative. The second thing is being the most flexible as possible, meaning just to give you like a very simple examples. I had to face in the past when there was new regulations in China, the idea that, for instance, data were not being possible to be accessible from any entity outside China. And so what we came out was to have like a single application running everywhere in the world, but the data that were coming from China were needed to be specifically encrypted with keys coming from China. So the application itself could run everywhere in the world, but the thing is your database were not touched, or the data were not accessible except for those who had the keys, and the keys were residing in China. So I don't know if I managed to answer to your question.
Thank you so much, Fabio. So, Sira, if you have any comments on Fabio's answer or you want to follow up, please go ahead. Meanwhile, I will read you the second question. So, Sejiola said, thank you for the presentation. Can cybersecurity governance be effectively standardized across industries, or should it be sector specific? Again, should or can cybersecurity governance be effectively standardized across industries, or should it be just sector specific?
So coming back to the slide that I was showing about this, so the thing is, there are some elements that can be applied broadly in any single industry without any single problem, I will say. But there are some elements that needs to be specified for a specific industry. So this is a very generic answer. I will try to go into some examples to help you going through this. So if we are talking about, for instance, a regulation that requires you to have a specific kind of care about prototypes, okay, and specifically about vehicle prototypes, because vehicles has their own components that, for instance, engine, motors, wheels, and so on and so forth, that has no reason why you should have the same request in case of you're running an hospital. It has very low probability that a regulation like TISAX, that is specific for automotive, an hospital is going to implement. But on the opposite side, if we're talking about specific care about your personal diseases, imagine someone who has some mental diseases and their data needs to be not accessible by anyone with very, very stringent reasons, why an automotive company should go through this specific request. And coming back to the last thing that we discussed, so about project management, we said that compliance has costs. We cannot like just avoid it. Compliance has lots of costs. So imagine that I'm in an hospital and someone asks me to implement a standard that has to do with motors and engines. Why should I pay tons of costs, but also tons of technical implementations to accept to be audited by an entity who is going to audit me about automotive reasons? That's just my humble question. So the thing is, there are some elements which has to do with international standards that applies or fits for all. That's good. But when we're going to decline some very specific elements to very niche technical components or very niche, I will say, organizational components, maybe it's better to have industry standards that specifies those ones.
Thank you so much, Fabio. We have another one from Sira, and Sira says, what advice would you give to someone new to cybersecurity leadership?
So that's $1 billion question, of course. Simply because, as we discussed during this this webinar, organization, and not simply organization, cultures has different different components. Some of them are under your control and other not. What I could suggest is to have a very good leadership, at least in compliance. So I don't want to cover all the cybersecurity, but at least in compliance, is to be very well acknowledged about new changes in the legislation, have a very good acumen about security elements that are into different cultures and jurisdictions. And this is, I will say, in the cloud elements that you need to take into consideration in order then to boost it into leadership. In my opinion, the most important thing is to have a very good relationship, especially from, I will say, personal point of view with your team. I suppose that today the great difference is the person, and he's the person who can understand the team, who can drive the team without, of course, with no kind of micromanaging your team, and boosting the best that you can do with your colleagues / managers. That's my opinion, is the most important thing.
Thank you so much, Fabio. So everyone, we still have 5 minutes left. If you have questions, I'll go back now to my question, Fabio. Meanwhile, waiting for anyone else who wants to raise a hand or ask a question. So my question is, with regulations evolving quickly, how can organizations ensure that all staff, including those who are non-technical, are kept informed and engaged? Again, so with regulations evolving quickly, how can organizations ensure that all staff, including those who are non-technical, are kept informed and engaged?
So I will say there are multiple ways to tackle this. Generally speaking, but this is the answer that you could get from anyone, is the typical annual cybersecurity awareness and training. Okay,
right.
This fits for all, but then, in my opinion, you need to keep persons attentive, and how you can do this is stimulating their attention. The typical way is like phishing campaigns. So like to act like a potential hacker that goes to your email and tries to extract data from you. And so if your employees are capable to catch it, is a very good way to measure how the company is working. But anyway, is also working with internal newsletters, if you are an intranet, or if you have also gaming solutions, that would be the best, because when it comes to games, everyone comes back to where I would say baby time. And so gamifying the cybersecurity nuances could be also a very well way. So last but not least, he says, is like having I will say on quarterly or half a year reminders, and something that, in my opinion, but it's just my opinion, sorry if not everybody agree with, is having meeting persons. Because after COVID, we are all, I will say, super fancy about working remotely from everywhere, from Greenland to, I don't know, Patagonia, or to some very interesting shores in the Caribbean. But the thing is, when you meet your team, and not only your team, but also the rest of the company, and directly expressing them, which are the most important elements in cybersecurity, this remains from hearing to touching to all the typical sensors that you're not applying virtually.
Right. Thank you so much, Fabio. I have one more question. Actually, I'm going to take the opportunity since we don't have any questions left from the attendance. So, do you think the shift towards more cross-functional cybersecurity governance makes it easier for women with diverse backgrounds to enter and grow in the field? The question again, do you think the shift towards more cross-functional cybersecurity governance makes it easier for women with diverse backgrounds to enter and grow in the field?
So I would answer to your questions reverting completely the position, saying
Okay.
saying in my previous experience, I've never had any colleague slash manager who came from their first experience from cybersecurity.
Oh, wow.
So the thing is, cybersecurity is becoming much, much more broad and an interdisciplinary situation where you can have people, of course, that come from very high technical IT degrees or experience. But for instance, just taking from my previous experiences, people from crime scene investigation can be very useful, for instance, in the incident management. That maybe someone who grow just from cyber do not have the capacity in terms of previous skills to understand how a cyber criminal could work. Or on the opposite, people coming from political sciences, they can understand how geopolitical situations are different. And for instance, I don't know, an ordinance from the US presidency is totally different, even like putting down with the same words from a directive from the EU, for instance. Or people with legal knowledge, they can tell you, for instance, if a specific standard has, I'll say, non-compliance to a specific standard has much more consequences in terms of fines or bad reputation instead of not complying with GDPR, for instance. People who comes from even marketing could be very useful in terms of communication. When you are talking about cyber awareness, it's not just putting like I just take like joyfully my experience in engineering is not just putting some bullet points in a slide that make changes the the behavior of our colleagues. A person from marketing has acumen on this, and especially when since we are talking about women for cyber, what I have to say is the capacity that women has to prioritize things. I've never seen any man capable to do this. Men generally have an attire to say everything is urgent, because they have this, we'll say, almost like Rambo mindset or masculine mindset to say everything is important immediately, and who cares about what is important, like to be prioritized. or on the opposite, what is the feelings of your colleagues, what is the personal, I would say, and also mental safety that needs to be applied. Women has this, I will say, mm, perfect touch that men don't have.
Well, that's amazing to hear from a man's perspective. Thank you so much, Fabio. You've been given lots of hearts while you're explaining this. Just one thing, Estella was actually saying the same thing. She said, I myself started from political science and international relations and went into digital and low cybersecurity. So exactly what Fabio is describing. So we went over time. Thank you so much, Fabio. Thank you so much again for your time, your effort. Thank you everyone for attending. And thank you also for filling the survey that helps me make a better job at what I do. And see you in the next webinar, which is on the 27th. Fabio, have a wonderful evening, and everyone else the same. And see you soon. Thank you. I will leave the floor for you, Fabio, for last words before we log out.
So for me, it was just a pleasure to be able to be with you. Very splendid audience, very splendid questions, and as already said, all my biggest thank you goes to my team, and especially the women from my team that made also this directly or indirectly possible.
Thank you. Have a nice evening, everyone. Bye-bye, and see you in the next one.